and call it progress. Down with those who doubt. To join the causes others join and shout when others shout. Come, you're a man, no passive stone. Stand up and call your soul your own. Go on alone, go on alone. Banish weakness, go on alone. Go on alone, go on alone. Don't look back, just go on alone. Some men lack the daring ever to be free. They shun the heights and crowd the depths and court security. Come, you're a man, no passive stone. Stand up and call your soul your own. Go on alone, go on alone. Banish weakness, go on alone. Go on alone, go on alone. Don't look back, just go on alone. Cowards see but pride in singularity. Oh, never mind if men are wrong, so long as they agree. Come, you're a man, no passive stone. Stand up and call your soul your own. Go on alone, go on alone. Banish weakness, go on alone. Go on alone, go on alone. Don't look back, just go on alone. Claim the power within you, ever to defy. The world may change or disappear, but truth can never die. Come, you're a man, no passive stone. Stand up and call your soul your own. Go on alone, go on alone. Banish weakness, go on alone. Go on alone, go on alone. Don't look back, just go on alone.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome. So nice to see so many new faces. My name's Jyotish, and this is my wife, Devi. And we're very happy that you've all come. Swami Kriyananda called this morning and specifically asked that we convey his love to all of you. He just returned from a big conference in Rome, and he spoke to over 1,000 people there. It was a yoga conference. This spring they have been launching the new autobiography of a yogi, the original edition translated into Italian. And it's been extraordinarily well received, and people are very, very happy to have it. But he sounded very joyful, very up, and was happy to hear that we were doing Sunday service so we could convey his love and blessings. Oh. Yeah, just happened to open to it. This is this week's reading from Rays of the One Light. These are parallel passages from the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita, showing the similarity of the two scriptures. This is Why Do Devotees Fall? Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. An endlessly fascinating question is, why did Judas fall after receiving the extraordinary blessing of being accepted into the inner circle of Jesus Christ's disciples? For Judas was one of the 12 apostles, yet he betrayed Jesus and earned for himself the opprobrium of Christendom for all futurity for his sin. We find Judas reprimanding Jesus just days before that betrayal. Jesus, aware that his disciples would soon be facing with his death the supreme tragedy of their lives, allowed Mary to express her devotion by anointing his feet with costly ointment. This act of wanton waste, as Judas saw it, awakened indignation in that disciple. Why was not this ointment sold for 300 pence and given to the poor? This he said, not that he cared for the poor, but because he was a thief and kept the purse and bare what was put therein. Then Jesus said, "Let her alone. Against the day of my burying hath she kept this. For the poor always ye have with you, but me ye have not always." Doubt not the power of delusion. Respect it. Indeed, fear it, though not in the sense of cowering before it. For, as Yogananda said, one is not safe until he attains nirvikalpa samadhi, the state of final union with God. Judas, through attachment to money, opened his consciousness to subtle influences, which may be called satanic, that drew his thoughts toward other related attitudes, the importance of worldly power, for instance, and of worldly influence. The Bhagavad Gita gives a graphic explanation of how easily the mind can be drawn downward once it begins to feed on wrong attitudes. In the second chapter, Sri Krishna states, "If one ponders on sense objects, there springs up attachment to them. From attraction grows desire. Desire, impatient for fulfillment, flames to anger. From anger there arises infatuation, the delusion that one object alone is worth clinging to the exclusion of all others. From infatuation ensues forgetfulness of the higher self. From forgetfulness of the self follows denigration of the discriminative faculty. And when discrimination is lost, there follows the annihilation of one's spiritual life. At the first thought of delusion, Paramahansa Yogananda said, that is the time to stop it. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om, Om.
Good morning, everyone. I too want to welcome you all, and especially people who are here for the first time. We hope you had a great weekend and enjoyed this beautiful community. I'd like to start by reading from Yogananda's book of prayer poems, Whispers from Eternity. This one is number 147. Demand not to be enslaved by the ego or by ego-centered passivity. I want to use my own will, but guide it ever, Father, toward the golden paradise of all fulfillment. For I would be infinity's smiling child, confident of being imprisoned no longer behind bars of fruitless desire and withered hopes. I would break the shameful cords of lethargy that have presumed to hold me and step fearlessly into freedom. Released, I now blaze my way through forests of every limitation and delusion. Oh, my little vain ego may strut proudly, saying, "Behold my glory, worship me," but I will look through its transparent form and behold thine unimaginable beauty, clothed in the subtle form of the whole universe. The silence-attuned hearing of my soul will ignore that tiny boasting masquerader, my little self impersonating thee, and will listen rapturously to the wind-borne fragrant music of thine own matchless voice, whispering across the ages, I am he. Every year in our community about this time, we have an event here that for many of us is one of the highlights of the year, and that's our school graduation and awards ceremony. And this year, I have to say, I was so moved by what I saw in the teachers expressing the accomplishments of students. This one was from kindergarten that I attended all the way through our graduating high school students. There was one the previous day for the preschool students, which we weren't able to go to. But in watching the qualities that are coming out of these children, as I say, from kindergartners on, I can't tell you how inspired it is to see this, because children from 5 and 6 years old developing insights and strengths and levels of self-awareness that many of us as adults are still struggling to find. And I really felt that this was not only the future of Ananda, but this is the future of evolution of humanity, to begin training these children. And in a phone call last week with Swami Kriyananda, I mentioned we had gone to the school concert and how radiant the students were. We have a system of education called Education for Life that was inspired by Swami Kriyananda. And our schools are called Living Wisdom Schools. And I said to Swamiji, how you can see how this system of education just transforms students who come maybe as young children, and then in a few years they're just so centered and so expressing divine consciousness. So I said, you can really see how the system is changing people. And Swamiji replied, always the teacher, always correcting. He said, systems don't change people, people change people. And he was saying it's the loving, sensitive guidance of our teachers and parents that are bringing out these changes that we see. But what I was so touched by, so many of the qualities that I saw these students expressing, and I thought they fit so perfectly into our discussion this morning. Because the first one that I want to touch on 3 areas. The first is how, in answering the question, how do devotees fall? And rather than just sort of standing and watching people fall off the cliff and say, oh, look, there goes one, there goes one. He made a nice splash down there. But what can we do, every single one of us, to begin reorienting our consciousness so that even if we have fallen, we remain bloody but unbroken. We get up and say, I continue on, and I will pick up where I have left off. But the 3 things I want to talk about, the first one is that I saw expressed in our students, sensitive self-awareness. The second, to be vigilant in your virtues. And the third, to be always attuned to God and Guru. So first, sensitive self-awareness. I was so amazed. I believe it was Narani's first grade class, where there were several children, she said, who came up to her at a certain point, and one little girl said, I think I just hurt someone's feelings. And Narani said, well, what happened? And she explained, and they went and were able to soothe the trouble that it caused. Another incident, a little child a first grader came up to Narani and said, I think I just did something wrong. And Narani asked all those present, how many of you as adults, when something has gone wrong, just as we were reading in the reading this morning on introspection, how many of you, she said, let's do a show of hands, when something goes wrong says, it's the other person's fault? How many say, I think I did something wrong? And this is the beginning of how we can avoid getting trapped by delusion, to be sensitively aware, to be mindful all the time if we are off. Swami Kriyananda has written a wonderful book called Sadhu Beware. Sadhu means a renunciate, someone who is trying to dedicate their life to the spiritual search. And in it he talks about how to be an ego detective. And when he said the ego is centered in the medulla oblongata, this is part of the teachings of yoga. This is when the body, at the point of conception, this is the medulla is the first cell that differentiates into all the other complexities, the eyes and the hair and the fingers and everything else that comes from that first spark at the medulla oblongata, and that's the seat of ego. So Swami said, when you feel, if you're in a situation that feels off to you, feel where your energy is. Is it conflagrating? Is it coming together, coalescing in the area of the medulla, which is at the back of the brain, the back, sort of where the skull meets the spine there? If you feel the energy is strong there, then you know you're acting from a point of egoic delusion. If your energy is centered in the heart center, which is the center of devotion and receptivity to divine consciousness, or even better at the spiritual eye, the center of superconsciousness, then you can be pretty sure that you have clarity. But to go through each day and to live, that's why Master said the minutes are more important than the years. And that's this passage from the Gita. It says, from gazing on objects of desire. That's the very first step. And I mean, all we have to do is turn on a television or pick up a magazine, and there they are, objects of desire. But if we can just be aware, I am centered here. Master said, Yoganandaji said, when, he came to America in 1920 and lived through the Roaring '20s and the Depression and the war years and the post-war years. These were not times of great spiritual consciousness in our country. But he was a warrior. And he said when people come, women would come particularly, and talk with him and try to put out kind of perhaps seductive energy, he said, I would just make my body, I would not feel my body from the neck down. I would just be centered at the spiritual eye, and I would talk philosophy to them, and they would soon lose interest. So we need to be aware. Just as those children, I think I hurt someone's feelings. I think I did something wrong. And they weren't kind of cowering about it, like, oh, I'm a bad person. But I want to change this. I want to be always sensitively aware of living a life that's balanced, that's uplifted, that's supportive of my brothers and sisters and my playmates. And to when you're off, don't beat yourself up, but just say, I need a self-correction. And if you have a trusted friend, share that with them. But even better, share it with God. Just say, Lord, this day was not the best. And in fact, this leads us to the next point, which is to be vigilant in your virtues. We also had the great opportunity about a week ago to visit the girls' high school, junior high school and high school. And they were asking questions, and we had such a good time. It was just, I can't tell you the quality of these young people that are coming and being trained here. But one girl asked a question. She said, we're told to keep journals. And our teacher, I think it was Hridaya, it might have been Nitai, gave us the assignment that we should write down what our basic values are. And then this girl asked the question, which is really the struggle of human existence. She said, how do I not lose my values in daily life? When things happen, it seems like it would be easier to compromise, how can I always live by my values? And isn't that the struggle that every single one of us go through? We know what we want, we know what we expect of ourselves, or maybe not. But how easy is it to keep it? And so these young high school students were instructed to keep a journal and write down their values. And you know, this is a very good practice for us all to do. What really is important to me in my life? Clarify it, make it focused, put it into words, and then absorb it. And so the answer we gave to her when she said, how do I keep my values ever present before me? We shared things that Masterhood and Swamiji have taught us. We said, when you wake up in the morning, greet the day with joy and with the affirmation of who you want to be that day. What are your values? Are they kindness? Are they selflessness? Are they willingness? And say, this day, not forever and ever, but this day, I will do that. And if we can do this every single day of our life, think of how much we will have accomplished. And then at night, when we go to bed, Swamiji has told us, introspect, that was our reading this morning, and say, where was I off? That's the wonderful allegory of the Bhagavad Gita. It starts off on a battlefield, and it's all allegorical. But the forces, the introspective mind says, who won today? And well, that's a very good question to ask ourselves at the end of each day. Start off with good intentions to live your values, and then at the end of the day, reevaluate. And honestly, that was the thing I just loved about watching and listening to the children, and especially our two graduating seniors in their graduation speeches. Remarkable self-honesty, remarkable freedom from, I am trying to make an impression. This is the impression I'm trying to make. They were so free of that. It was simply, this is who I am. And if we can do that at the end of each day, not blaming ourselves, not going to bed saying, oh, blast, what a mess I made of this day. Just do a little, check over your values and say, didn't do so good on that one, lost it on that one. And then the next day you pick it up. And if we can, the thing that is so thrilling about the teachings of this path is that they are ever encouraging, ever transforming, and there's no room for self-recrimination. Whatever we may have done at the past, it simply doesn't matter. Simply doesn't matter. Today matters. This day matters. This moment matters. And just to go forward, so to be vigilant in your virtues and your values, and to be attentive to them. And when you go off, self-correct. Self-correct. You know, the other day I was doing yoga postures with one of our wonderful yoga teachers, Barbara Bingham, and we were doing a balance pose. And Barbara, she had such wonderful insight, spiritual insight into yoga postures. And she said, feel the ankle. There are so many muscles there, and they're constantly balancing. They're constantly trying to keep you from falling over. And when she said that, I could balance because I could feel the process. And she said, even in wobbling, that's a really good thing because it strengthens those muscles. So even when we wobble in our virtues, just say, it's okay. I'm getting the sense of how to stay there. I'm getting the sense how to be balanced in my virtues. And then, so we have sensitive self-awareness, vigilance in your virtues and values. And if I didn't stress it enough, try keeping a journal. Yogananda recommends this, a spiritual diary, and write down the progress you make. Write down the areas that you're really trying to work on. And at the end of a period of time, I would go back and read my old journals from time to time. You think, wow, was I really working on that? You know, and because it seems so much a part of you now. And you don't realize the transformation that happens in that daily, moment-by-moment effort to transform our consciousness. And then finally, we have sensitive self-awareness, vigilance in your virtues and values, and finally, to try always to strive to be in tune. And what does that mean? again, there was a beautiful episode from the awards ceremony, and I think it was a first grader, it might have been a second grader, but they do this practice where they try to feel their little self and their big self. And they're taught when you're in your little self, that's the part that gets mad, that wants the toy before anybody else, that doesn't want to share. But the big self is that part of us that's always happy and always willing to give. And there were so many examples of that. From the little boy who his friend had decided to take on a big physical challenge. He was decided to run 3 miles, and he set his will to it. And this other little boy, it wasn't his challenge, but he said, "I'll keep you company because I think you would like a friend when you do this." And so he ran the whole 3 miles with them, and these were little children. And just to help a friend, he was living in the big self. And my favorite was that one of the little children came up to their teacher and said, "I can't even remember my little self anymore." And it just echoes the words of one of Yogananda's most advanced woman disciple, Gyanamata. She said in her letters, "Before my eyes, my dead self lies, oh bliss beyond compare." She didn't even remember her little self anymore. And that's, in a nutshell, particularly for those of you who are new, that's what attunement is. The guru is not somebody who bosses you around or makes you do things or any of those things. The guru is our bigger self. And the more we can remember that, and moment by moment just say, "What would you do, Master? How would you live this life?" Or if you're a Christian or if you're a Jew or whatever religion you follow, it doesn't matter. It's God is our bigger self. Because the guru, in our teachings, the guru-disciple relationship is a real bedrock of it. But in other paths, then you can just work in this way with God. But just to realize that I can't change myself, no matter how hard I try, but with your grace, God and Guru, this little self can lie before me dead. I remember many years ago, I was having a problem getting along with someone, and I went to Swamiji, and I said, "Swami, I've tried everything I know how to do. I have prayed, I have meditated, I've prayed for the other person, I've done visualizations, I've done affirmations. It doesn't go away." And he just patted me on the head, just so cheerfully, and he said, "Oh, these things are ultimately God's grace. Don't worry about it." And it did go away. It did. And it's honestly one of the greatest joys of my life to see it gone. But we need to understand that it's really by attunement, by saying, "I don't want to be in my little self. I want to be in my bigger self, my greater self, my infinite self." That's where joy and freedom reside. The more we can do that. And they say that spiritual growth, Master has said, that spiritual growth is 25% the effort of the devotee, 25% the intercession of the guru on his behalf, on the behalf of the devotee, and 50% the grace of God. But as Master went on to say, but the guru is united with God. So if you recalculate, you get that it's really 75% grace of God and guru and 25% our own effort. But that 25%, as Master said, has to be 100% of what we have to do, what we know we should do. So it's the process of how devotees fall. It needn't happen if we can be aware where our mind is getting off, if we can clarify and hold to our virtues, and if we can always call on God and Guru. And if we do fall, then we call on God and Guru even more. That's the secret. Master said, "I am bloodied but unbowed." And that's how we all are. Every day is a challenge to our attunement, to our focus on our keeping the things that are important to us, and to being aware. But if we can go forth helping each other, not judging each other. Falling is not a fun thing for anybody. It's not fun to watch somebody make mistakes because we know that there's pain involved, picking yourself up again. But if we can just more than anything, the most important thing really is attunement to the Guru. Master was talking about, Swami Kriyananda, if you don't know, was a direct disciple of Paramahansa Yogananda and spent the last 3.5 years of Yogananda's life with him. And there was once a man who was one of the monastics, and then he left the path and was lost in a life of not much fulfillment. And Master said to Swamiji, he needn't have fallen if he had stayed in tune. I would have protected him. And so we need to remember that. The grace of the Guru, always there, always watching us, but we have to do our part. And I want to close by reading the closing few paragraphs of Swamiji's wonderful book, Sadhu Beware. So this is the very conclusion of the book. Ultimately, no human effort will take us to God. The whole secret of the spiritual path is to get the ego and the attachments and desires that cling to it like barnacles out of the way, and to receive into our souls the blessings of God. What the Guru does for us is primarily on a level of consciousness. He works from within, on our thoughts and feelings. Our job, above all, then, is to offer our hearts and minds up to Him, that He may transform us. Gradually, His egoless consciousness seeps into our ego-centered consciousness and transforms us with new understanding of our own reality. The true goal of renunciation, then, is only one: to eliminate every attachment to littleness in order that the Guru may enter and expand our awareness to infinity.